Hey everybody! In June of 2014, earlier this summer, I got to play a Magfed game at Top Gun Paintball in Cream Ridge, New Jersey. It was a wonderful game, had a really great time, and it was the first time I played a Magfed only game. Luckily, the rules were such that 10-round tubes with stick feeds were allowed, so I could use my existing gear to play in a Magfed game without having to rent a Magfed marker or invest in a Magfed setup. At this game and afterwards, a bunch of people asked me, you play limited paint, you play pump, why don't you play Magfed? And that's a really good question. So here's why I don't play Magfed. Before I get into the actual reasons, I want to make two quick points. First is that I really like Magfed overall. I always play limited paint, and anytime everyone else is playing limited paint, that's a great thing. It changes the pacing of the game, it changes the tactics. If you look at the FPS videos from this game, it was called Operation Ivory Coast. You can see that the pace is very different, it's much slower, there's a lot of sneaking around, a lot of use of concealment versus hard cover. So it's a very different style of paintball, and I really like that. I also really like Magfed because of the people. I know a lot of people that play pump, limited paint, Magfed, and it's a very relaxed, laid-back crowd. The attitudes are fantastic overall. There's always exceptions, but overall the attitudes are fantastic. You don't have tempers flaring on the field, and it's just a really nice atmosphere. And in addition to that, because the players, when they play non-Magfed specific games, are playing at a handicap relative to everyone else in the field, they tend to be really good at moving and picking their shots and hitting on that first shot. So overall, I really like Magfed play. I have a great time whenever I play Magfed limited paint, that kind of thing. The second point I want to make is that by a very expansive definition of Magfed play, I actually do play that. There was a thread on M. Carter Brown a while back, I'll post a link down below in the description, where everyone basically debated what constitutes Magfed play and what doesn't count. And by a loose definition that was generally agreed upon, playing with a stick feed and 10-round tubes fell under the very broad umbrella of Magfed paintball. By a more specific definition that includes some kind of self-contained unit that contains spare paintballs and also loads them into the marker, without which the marker cannot be fired, tube-fed paintball doesn't count under that definition. So that's a stricter definition under which what I do does not count as Magfed paintball. But again, by the broader, more expansive definition of Magfed paintball, 10-round tubes with a stick feed does count. Those 2 points aside, why I do not play Magfed paintball, there are a bunch of reasons. First and foremost is the cost. The initial investment to get into Magfed paintball is pretty steep. Generally, you need to buy a magazine-fed marker, you need to buy a sufficient number of magazines, and you need to buy some kind of rig to carry those magazines. You can get away with just throwing them in cargo pockets, but that's not that great. There are certain types of Magfed markers that are just adapted from non-Magfed markers. There's now an adapter available for the Tippmann 98 Custom that allows you to stick TPX mags in where the feed neck goes. The adapter just replaces the little drop-off feed neck on the Tippmann 98 and replaces it with a mag well, so you can just stick a TPX mag in the side, and it kind of sticks off the side like a Sten submachine gun, World War II era submachine gun. Those are great, but that's the exception. For the most part, you need to buy a marker that is specifically designed to use mags, plus the mags, plus a way to carry those mags. That's a fairly high initial investment. Additionally, relative to other methods of playing limited paint, Magfed paintball is quite expensive. If you take a TPX mag, which is a relatively inexpensive mag that's about $15, compare that to a 10-round tube that's about 15 cents, right? The mag carries 7 paintballs, the tube carries 10, and the tube actually takes up less space and is lighter. Most of the weight of the tube is the weight of the paintballs, whereas for the mag, most of the weight is something other than the 7 or 8 paintballs it can hold. This gets into the second major reason that I don't play Magfed, which is the efficiency, by which I don't mean the number of shots you get for a given amount of air. For how many shots do you get out of a 45-45 or 13-3K, that's not what I mean. I mean that in terms of weight and area taken up and compactness, you can carry much more paint with a tube-based setup than a mag-based setup. And going back to the TPX mag example, a TPX mag on a chest rig, for example, takes up about twice as much room as a 10-round tube. It is substantially heavier and it holds fewer paintballs. So I can have, even if the mags are stacked in such a way that they're very densely packed, I can hold more paintballs for less weight in that same area using 10-round tubes. And then there's the specificity of Magfed setups. This is again a general rule, there are a few exceptions, but for the most part, mags are specific to the markers and the size pouches that will hold them. So if you're going to get into Magfed with a full Magfed setup, you need the marker, a set of mags, and a rig to contain those mags to hold them when you're on the field. And if you want to get a second Magfed setup, you need, in addition to a new marker, you need a new set of mags and a new way to carry those mags. There are certain mag sizes that are close enough that the same pouches will work for both different types. But for instance, if you have a DAM, the die assault matrix, the Magfed die marker, and a TPX, you need a different set of pouches to hold those mags in addition to having the two sets of mags and the two markers. In contrast, my 10-round tube with a stick feed setup works for any marker. I have a couple of rigs that hold 10-round tubes. I have one stick feed that is universal for any marker that has a vertical clamping feed neck, and it doesn't really matter which I want to use on a given day. My tubes will work with any of them. So that's a major point against Magfed paintball in my book. So those 3 points really are the reasons I don't play Magfed paintball. 1, the upfront cost. 2, the efficiency of the setups in terms of weight and capacity. And 3, the specificity, requiring a Magfed player to have multiple setups, one for each marker, rather than having a universal setup that they can use with whatever marker they happen to be shooting that day. But again, I do want to emphasize, I really like the Magfed style of play. I like limited paint. I love those types of games. But in general, for these reasons, Magfed paintball specifically is not for me. Thanks for watching. See you next time.